Bonsoir à tous. La slide qui s'affiche, explique le focus de mon association. Même si elle est rédigée en anglais, je vais vous l'expliquer en français. Donc il s'agit essentiellement de travailler sur, le risque, qui concerne les enfants les plus vulnérables, à savoir les enfants préverbaux. L'enfant, ne parle pas, correctement avant, 3-4 ans. Et donc c'est ceux-là qui risquent d'être, particulièrement vulnérables et en risque. On sait que l'Office des mineurs lance des enquêtes en moyenne sur, des cas d'enfants et la moyenne d'âge, c'est 4 ans. Ce qui veut dire vraiment qu'ils ont suffisamment de cas entre les 0-4 ans et les 4-18 ans à s'occuper. C'est quand même un phénomène massif, comme l'avait dit, Gabriel Hazan. Et en fait, ce que j'observe beaucoup, internationalement, hein, en ce moment, c'est que la défense des enfants, souvent, s'appelle uniquement protection des enfants, ce qui escamote un peu le côté confrontation avec une intelligence adverse. Mais passons, c'est surtout qu'il y a une énorme aimantation vers, la focalisation sur les, online harms. Donc qu'est-ce qu'il advient, de l'utilisation des nouvelles technologies par rapport à cette problématique pédocriminelle? L'avantage du numérique, c'est que ça laisse des traces, donc on réalise que le phénomène existe, réellement. Ça peut l'amplifier, donc ça peut donner accès, heu, aux enfants, mais là, on parle uniquement des préverbaux, donc en fait, il y a besoin de passer par l'intermédiaire des parents. Donc de ce fait, comment s'y prennent-ils? Soit, sur les réseaux sociaux, ils repèrent des parents, qui exposent un peu leurs enfants, qui sont fiers de leurs enfants et ils commencent à faire du grooming, c'est-à-dire une approche, par, une, un hack psychologique, un peu comme on fait, en cybersécurité. On fait de la reconnaissance, avant d'attaquer, mais là, c'est un peu pareil. Et aussi, ils peuvent se servir des applications de rencontres. Il a été observé, des clics, sur, notamment, parents avec enfants, parents ayant déjà des enfants d'un premier mariage, de manière, obsessionnelle et un peu aberrante, en fait. Donc en termes de statistiques, de comportement dans certaines applications de rencontres, on s'est rendu compte qu'il y avait des recherches par rapport à ça. Ensuite, là, je parle uniquement du web, disons que je parle pas du dark web. Par exemple, dans des boucles, de Telegram ou de messagerie chiffrée, ils peuvent se passer des guides d'approche, alors non pas pédocriminels, là, il faut employer le bon terme, il faut employer le terme népiocriminel. Népios, ça veut dire l'enfant préverbal qui n'a pas la capacité de langage. Et là, les conseils sont différents et donc ces guides, sont diffusés et partagés, notamment sur comment, mieux, attaquer ses enfants et également, les enfants, particulièrement vulnérables dans une situation familiale, défavorable et cetera, les agresseurs se recommandent en fait telle ou telle, victime. À ce titre, vous pourriez regarder, The Children in the Pictures. C'est un film, documentaire qui explique le travail de la cellule Argos basée en Australie et nous avons également des documentaires, qui sont passés en France, mais qui expliquent ça assez bien. Récemment, et ça je le savais de la grâce au réseau de personnes, notamment où tu as mentionné Gérard, les gens de point de contact. Il y a pas mal de choses, même dans le web visible, hein, pour acheter des poupons à l'effigie d'enfants absolument, réalistes. avant les questions de taxes douanières, et cetera, bon, les prix sont défiant toute concurrence, la qualité, semble vraiment extraordinaire. Et donc, je vais pas expliquer les détails scabreux, mais en fait, les vendeurs savent très bien que ce n'est pas pour de l'éducation à être parent, hein. Donc, ça, c'est des choses qui sont visibles sur des applications Instagram notamment, mais il y a beaucoup d'autres applications qui vous dirigent et puis qui ont un langage qui va parler aux pédocriminels, aux nipiocriminels, donc avec, par exemple, des émoticônes comme, une part de pizza avec du fromage. Les initiales, c'est cheese pizza, CP. En fait, c'est child pornography, donc quelqu'un qui voit des images sur certaines applications qui ont ces codes-là, c'est qu'il va trouver ce qu'il cherche. Alors bien sûr, ce dont on entend parler souvent, c'est-à-dire les pédocriminels qui sont nichés dans les forums au sein des jeux ou sur les réseaux sociaux, ça j'en parle pas parce que vous en avez suffisamment entendu parler, on vous a éveillé sur ce risque et un enfant qui a moins de 3 ans, en fait, n'est pas susceptible de répondre à ce grooming, hein, cette approche par, enfin, c'est une sorte de séduction, en offrant, quelques, goodies ou voilà, des petites choses sur les réseaux sociaux et ça, un enfant de 3 ans va pas se lai enfin, n'est pas susceptible d'être hameçonné comme ça. Donc j'ai fait 2 colonnes, il y a toujours comment, la menace, approche les petits, à gauche, donc là, c'est dans la sphère online et comment on peut détecter et réduire, cette menace. Alors tout d'abord, on a des outils en France, on a des entrepreneurs, il y a un outil, développé par un Français, qui s'appelle Percipion qui peut, en étant positionné sur, qui peut aider, si vous voulez, les plateformes à mieux, respecter le DSA, puisqu'on parlait des règlements européens,
Excuse-moi,
puisqu'elles ont maintenant
Simon
plus.
Simon est connecté là.
Oh, nice. Hello, Simon. So I will give you the floor. Can you please introduce yourself? I will just translate for. We are almost 80, 90 people. No, we are now 72.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you this evening. My name is Simon Bailey, and I'm the former National Policing Lead for Child Protection in the United Kingdom. I was a Chief Constable for 8 years, and during that time I led the UK's response to all forms of child sexual abuse. I retired in the summer of 2021, and I've continued to pursue my passion for keeping children safe. And I now work around the world trying to primarily ensure that we are doing everything we can to improve the response to online child sexual abuse.
You can carry on with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to spend 10 or 15 minutes with you this evening just talking about the scale of the online threat and what we are now seeing. But before I do, I'd just like to share with you some very recent research on the impact of online abuse that it's having on the victim survivors in comparison to those that his images have not been uploaded. And what research is now showing is that actually the harms and the traumas that are being sustained by victim survivors of online abuse are actually greater than those that know that their images have not been shared online. And I think we just have to remind ourselves, because certainly amongst professionals that I work with, there is not an appreciation of the scale of what is taking place with online abuse and the impact that it's having upon those victim survivors. So I'm going to look back in history just a little bit, just to make the point about the scale of the threat that we are dealing with. The Home Office in the United Kingdom undertook a study in the late 1990s, and there were fewer than 10,000 images of child sexual abuse in exploitation. Conservatively now, on the child abuse image database in the UK, there will be 25 million.
Il y a 25 millions d'images à l'heure actuelle.
That gives you some idea of the sheer scale of what we are now dealing with. And going back to 2010 and the dark web, there were no images or abuse taking place in the dark web going back to 2010. KidFlix, one of the largest paedophile video platforms in the world that was recently taken down, had 1.8 million users worldwide. It just gives you
1,8 million d'utilisateurs de par le monde sur la plateforme spécialisée sur ces contenus-là.
It just gives you some idea of the scale of the threat that we are all now collectively having to deal with. And I wish I could talk to you tonight and actually say that the threat is it's not as big. The abuse is going down. Unfortunately, all the indicators that I am seeing, all the indicators that I'm are having conversations about are all going in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, the threat is now getting worse. And I'll now describe how I'm seeing the threat become worse, if it could become worse. So we are now seeing children that are younger in age being abused, and levels of depravity reaching, if you could imagine, even greater levels. We are now having to come to terms with the advent of generative child sexual abuse material being driven by AI models.
L'intelligence artificielle génère ce genre de contenu également.
And of course, what that is allowing offenders to do is to create their own fantasy child sexual abuse material. And what, of course, we are now seeing is nudification applications now being used within schools. And we're even starting to see images that are being hosted on school websites being scraped to generate child sexual abuse material to then extort a school. So the threat from AI is getting even greater, and I am sure that you will all now be coming to terms with what is now taking place in virtual reality spaces. It won't be that much longer, I fear, before virtual reality spaces are photorealistic, and we will be having to deal with the rape and the abuse of children in a lifelike environment as a matter of routine. And of course, what we are seeing is the initial indications, and I'm sure the first 15-minute AI-generated child sexual abuse material video is there. And I cannot help but think that the first or second or third iteratives of a virtual reality child sexual abuse experience, if it's not already here, it will be coming, and it will be coming fairly quickly. And of course, what we are seeing with the advent of new technologies and the advent of new forms of abuse, we as a community are now having to deal with the impact that it is having on us and our colleagues. And I am now becoming aware of the fact that where officers and former police staff colleagues of mine were able to grade child sexual abuse material just by very quickly looking at the totality of the image and saying, yes, that is an image that categorized the most serious form. They're just being able to do that in less than a second. Generative CSAT images are now dictating that officers and staff are now having to look far more closely. They're having to look far more deeply at the images to see whether they are real or not, with all the associated challenges around well-being and their own welfare.
Okay, I just translate this, voilà, en français. C'est que les images, maintenant sont entremêlées, avec des images générées par IA, ce qui, génère beaucoup plus de travail pour, les officiers de police et beaucoup plus, de temps et donc a un impact psychologique encore plus grand.
And what we are now having to come to terms with, and again, I'm not sure how much of a problem that you are seeing in France with this, but what I would describe as the unfiltered development of large language model solutions, girlfriend apps, are causing some real issues. And yeah, I've been made aware of girlfriend apps that will almost not encourage, but will almost say that, yes, you want to have sex with a child. This is how you can have sex with that child without being caught. And will then even suggest that you might want to use drugs to make sure that the child is rendered submissive to your physical abuse. That is the kind of the technology that we are now having to come to terms with as a community. And the development of artificial intelligence, I am sure, as you will be seeing, is now becoming as big a threat as the abuse of children that we've had to come to terms with over the last, I would say, 20 to 25 years. My great fear is that even despite the emergence of greater legislation and greater regulation, the tech companies are still being slow to react. And unfortunately, as I think we are all aware, technology moves far quicker than we are able to respond to the abuse of it. And as a result, we are always playing a game of catch up. Now, I have had numerous thoughts about this, numerous sleepless nights. And my view on this is that the big tech companies didn't develop their operating systems, their software to facilitate the abuse of children on the industrial scale that is now taking place. I don't believe that they set out to do that. But what I do now believe is that there is such an overwhelming body of evidence that is now highlighting to them how their platforms are being used to facilitate abuse. They now have to start a very, very different conversation around safety by design and how that they start to make the abuse of their platforms ineffective. And I'll give you one example. I am sure that you will have had hundreds of young boys that have been groomed online using Snap. Snap knows where the hotspots are around in the world. They know the regions of the world where their technology is being used to facilitate abuse, yet they still permit those accounts to exist and they still permit the abuse to take place. I think they are the types of conversations that we need to be having with those big tech providers to say, you now have to do more. We have to provide them with the evidence. We have to provide them with the material that highlights the failings in their system, the lack of safety by design that's designed and built into the operating systems, whereby they start to take their responsibilities seriously. So I hope in the last 10 or 12 minutes or so, I've given you a very high level of overview of the scale of the threat that we are dealing with, how technology is being used to facilitate abuse, and how that technology is now evolving and how it's creating even greater problems for us as a community that are trying to tackle the threat and deal with it, and what some of those new and emerging threats are, and how we are going to have to step up to the challenge of dealing with the AI-generated content, abuse within virtual reality rooms, the development of large language models that will be abused to facilitate abuse, and how we collectively come together as a community to leverage the skills and the talent that would exist on this call to improve cybersecurity, to improve the safety by design, to develop the solutions in the conversations with big tech, to make sure that children can go online, they can be safe, parents can be confident that their children are not going to be at the kind of risk that they are at this moment in time, and create an internet where we feel all far more confident around what our children and young people are doing there. Muriel, I've finished with about a minute to spare. I hope I've met your brief and your expectations.